Having me here today. I appreciate the Chaparral folks. It's a very diverse group, just like Chaparral itself is. So as a forester coming from Northern California originally, early in my career, and then transplanting myself into the southern region about 10 years ago, learning much more about the Chaparral impact and diversity and biodiversity within it, and of course the challenges faced with the urban interface, which we're all talking about today. So nothing new, but there are some new ideas and some new spins on things, so it's interesting to me to be here today with you guys. So how do we fix some of this? Part of this is the vegetation treatment program within CAL FIRE and Board of Forestry. It's a tool in the toolbox, right? It's one of these things that we have in order to be in compliance with CEQA, so then we can get the grant, so then we can get the funding source, right? It's a mechanism to get to these other means, right? It's the paperwork, the documentation. And so what's important about it, of course, is we've talked about this a lot, is this natural fire cycle that occurs. This natural fire cycle, recreating the native plant community, right, in the fire return interval, getting the biodiversity that's out there naturally. That's what we would want to see as a society, right? If we can get back to this a natural fire return interval that we saw from indigenous nations, right? That would be better as a society. But we have these complexities such as the wildland and urban interface and the infrastructure that we've already created within this regime. And we talked about climate change pulling on this effect also, right? It's part of the equation. It's not just society, it's climate. And they all come together. And in the Cal VTP, we talk about that, and we do it in a programmatic analysis way, which is great because that gives us compliance with CEQA, right? So again, it's a tool in the toolbox that's been explained in the document. And we talked about this: high fire intensity, bad, right? Low fire intensity, good, right? For most species in California, with that low fire intensity, that high fire return interval with low fire intensity, that's where we will see increase in biodiversity in California, right? Generally speaking, not only in the forested environment, but also in chaparral. Of course, there are some little caveats that we already mentioned, such as old growth chaparral, not needing fire, needing that 90-year return interval. That is also, a vegetation type that we want to protect, right? And to save for 90 years, so then it does see the interval appropriately. But it's in a managed environment. One point I want to make as one thing I didn't put in my bio is I'm currently the CAL FIRE tribal liaison for the state. So I go out to these cultural burns all the time. So it is interesting to see some of the cultural and indigenous burning references today because I'm involved with that on a daily basis, which is great to see. And we have encouraged that in CAL FIRE over the last few years tenfold. So we're grasping that and trying to work with that the best we can. But they have the right idea. They have the right idea with native species. They have the right idea with natural environment. And so it is something that we as fire practitioners can learn from traditional ecological knowledge keepers. So how do we do it? Stewardship. And what are our tools in the toolbox? We have mechanical tools, right? Which include the harvesting, fellow buncher, masticator, chippers, ball and chain, the typical things that we saw from the 1950s, repurposed again today to do the same thing, to reduce chaparral, to reduce the forested environment, to create these fuel breaks, right? We have the manual, let's get out the weed eaters, let's go get those fire breaks maintained, right? We have the hand crews, a lot of labor intensive management. We have herbicide. I heard herbicide in the last thing from Robert. It's a great tool in the toolbox. It needs its own place though, right? There's certain limitations with herbicide use and treatment and exposure, right, for other plants and what those plants are being used for beyond that treatment, right? Especially if indigenous people are also trying to utilize those resources for limit of herbicide use. We have browsing, grazing. It's a tool in the toolbox. It's something we can use to maintain stuff. We can also use herbicide to create that impact, right? Or not herbicide, the grazing. we want to use that grazing tool as one of the tools in the toolbox, it depends on the carrying capacity of the environment, what the species are there, what's palatable to the animal, whether it's a deer, whether it's elk, whether it's sheep, whether it's goat, whether it's camel, doesn't matter, right? Depends on what they like, what kind of species are there. Goats are great. Burning, our last tool in our toolbox for prescribed fire. If we can burn the area, where's my little flames? There they are. We can burn the area, then at this intensity, at the right intensity for that environment, then that right intensity is defined by us as a culture, right? In balance with nature. That's the right intensity. And as other people have said, it's a moving target. What's that right spot, right? So we have to balance all of these things, which we've already talked about, so I'm glad I'm the last speaker of the day. And with that, how do we accomplish this? Well, in government, we got to write a piece of paper that talks about it. In government, that's how we get funds to support this. This is how we express how we're doing it for full transparency to the public, right? Because we're beholden to the public on what we do. And so part of that reason and the due diligence behind it is the CEQA process. Now, there's the complicated flow chart that is tiny print, and it's in the CEQA guideline, and it's there and it's been there for years, and if you want to look at it, you can. But it's convoluted, as CEQA was meant to be. And it really boils down to it's a process. CEQA is a process. It's a process of evaluation and analysis of your site-specific area for what your intended activities are, right? And the Cal VTP is one of those programs, the Programmatic EIR, Environmental Impact Report, that allows us to skip ahead and go, this is the tool we're going to use. Okay, we've done the analysis. Here we go for the activities, right? And part of this CEQA process is you have the beginning of the proposed action. What do you want to do? Is it a project or is it not a project? If it's not a project, no CEQA. If it is a project, is it ministerial? If it's ministerial, it needs a permit. If it's not ministerial, it's discretionary, we have some determination, some decision to make, then is it exempt, is the question. If it's exempt, we're going to use a notice of exemption. Common, everyday, takes a few hours to write and create, relatively easy to do because there's nothing to impact. There's no mitigation measures to propose. Easy, simple, not complex. If it's discretionary, then we have to do an initial study. We have to do an analysis of what's going on out there and what the impacts might be based on those activities. If we decide there are no impacts based on our activities, we're going to go down to a negative declaration. But we're concerned, so we do a negative declaration. We say, here's our project, here's our concerns, but we have no impacts. If we do have potential impacts, it's a mitigated negative dec. Each one of these become more and more complex in the analysis, in the evaluation, in the results, and time. If we decide that there are potential impacts, then we do an environmental impact report that says, hey, we have potential impacts. We have scenic values as potential impacts for a lot of our fuel reduction activities in CAL FIRE and across California because it doesn't look nice when we disturb it. That's a visual impact. That's an unavoidable visual impact that we as a society have said that's acceptable because of the increase in fire safety that you get. It's acceptable because of what you're protecting to have that temporary situation that doesn't look nice. That's an unavoidable impact that's acceptable, right? So there's these impacts that we can address in the environmental impact report. Now, through all of these complexities, you can jump ahead and say, we're going to do a programmatic environmental impact report. This programmatic environmental impact report is what Cal VTP is. That's what the Board of Forestry created. This tool jumps ahead and says, I might have impacts. I'm going to have automatic mitigation measures for these impacts in order to get through them so then I can use this tool and do my project. but there are limitations for that project. The secret process is set by statute. I'm going to skip over this quick because it's kind of fast. So how does the CAL FIRE and the CAL VTP work? It was approved in 2020, 31 million acres. It covers most of the state, not the federal land. It's for SRA, but the LRA, the local responsibility area, can be included with amendment. You can do a quick little analysis that says, this is just like SRA in the LRA, and we're going to include it. So there's a way to do it. Okay, so the types, or the fuel types that are covered in this programmatic EIR is grass, brush, and tree. When this was created, we did have to come to terms and use common terms, so we used tree instead of timber. Timber had a different definition. So grass seems simple, brush seems simple, then we used tree. That seems a little weird. Okay. As forestry, we're going to do tree types. No, it's timber types. It's forested types. No, it's tree. Right? It was one that wasn't used yet, so we use that. It took 12 years to create, by the way. The CAL VTP. Treatment types include fuel break, wildland-urban interface fuel reduction, and ecological restoration. What is your intent behind this project, generally speaking? It can have multiple, but it should have one general intent, which kind of gives you a sense of what the project is for. Right out the gate, you just select it, right? What is its majority purpose? And that's pretty nice to do up front because for the transparency of the public. What's your project for? And then the treatment activities. We're going to use prescribed fire and prescribed fire with piles, mechanical treatment, manual treatment, herbivore, or herbicide. We have a limited list. So here's our selection. Now we're starting to narrow down what we can do in that environment for that activity. We're narrowing down because the analysis could be so complex for all of California that it's too much. It's too dynamic. California is too dynamic. So we narrowed it down in the process in order to hone in on what the potential impacts could be across California. So the CAL VTP, the components, it has a specific project analysis that I mentioned that we created within CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE is not the lead agency for the CAL VTP, or we are a lead agency, but we didn't create it. The Board of Forestry created it. So working as a lead agency, we are going to say we are compliant with the Environmental Impact Report. If we can, as a lead agency, we can say that. Department of Fish and Wildlife can be lead agency, Water Quality can be lead agency, Resource Conservation Districts can be lead agencies, and the county fire can be lead agency, and say, you're compliant with this Environmental Impact Report. They're the ones that take the risk to be sued as lead agency. Right? Environmentalists or social group can say, oh, you're not following the Environmental Impact Report, we're going to sue you, and here's your lawsuit and litigation in California. Welcome to California. Right? Lead agency takes that risk. The project component takes the risk. Right? The CAL VTP has the analysis that takes a lot of that risk off, and with the 82 completed ones that are in the Board of Forestry currently, that risk is getting less and less because we keep doing it over and over again. And it's a tool that is getting used. It's already been challenged in court, and the judge said, nope, sorry, this is solid. So they lost. Right? Their first attempt. Now, if you do something wrong in the environment and you don't follow the rules of engagement with CAL VTP, you're going to get sued. That's your own fault. Right? But if you say what you're going to do and you do what you say, you're fine. That is covered under the environmental analysis. Right? So, part of that, CAL VTP doing the Pacific Project Analysis, which CAL FIRE created for itself, for its projects, as the agency, is the trick. It's what we can do as a lead agency, and as an agency, what we're willing to do. It's our version of compliance. Right? Our project-specific analysis. That's important. Part of that environment, that project-specific analysis includes the environmental checklists, the SPRs, the specific project requirements, which there are 70 of them, which end up being tied to mitigation measures within the project. Those mitigation measures are what you agree to do in order to avoid your impact. It comes with attachments, such as biological resources and addendums if needed. The other requirements are the specific project requirements for notification and public transparency. Who can do it? Anybody as a lead agency or responsible agency, you as a lead agency can do it, such as County Fire Department or Resource Conservation District. But you have to follow your own requirements within your organization as a lead agency. And what? We talked about this, fuel types, grass, brush, and tree, tactical treatments, such as prescribed fire, mechanical treatments, all of these things. When? The project-specific analysis and project timeline, it takes a while. And it will be compliant with all of these administrative or legislative laws, such as AB 52, 4123, confidential art. Takes a long time. You approve project, you file the notice of determination at the end, and you implement the project. All of this takes about 6 to 12 months. Go along this timeline. Minimum 6 months, 12 months is most likely for each one of these projects, from start to finish. It's not quick, but it is quicker than doing a mitigated neg deck from start to finish. It's already in place. It's already a process that's established. It's a great, valuable tool for you to use. It's across treatable landscape, different treatment types, whether it's shaded or ecological restoration or fuel breaks. Again, who can do it? CAL FIRE as a lead agency can do it. It's found on the Border Forestry website for examples and helpful hints, and for contacts and connections to who can help you do that. That's it. Questions?